Welcome to The Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. Hi, I'm Bela Measeck, coming to you from upstate New York. I'm a former 3-time entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and business school professor.
And coming to you from Münster, Germany, I'm Mike Wasserman, professor of international management at the Münster University of Applied Sciences. Thanks for joining us today. When Bela and I were both on the faculty of Clarkson University, we would have lots of interesting conversations about how the world is changing and even more specifically about how innovation and entrepreneurship are changing. We'd talk over coffee or lunch as time allowed. And almost 2 years ago, I moved to Germany and Bela retired a little bit after that. But Bela had the idea to continue these conversations in the form of a podcast, inviting others to listen in. And I thought this was a horrible idea. I said, I'm not a podcast guy, Bela, but as usual, you were right. And we've had a great time so far.
Yeah, so join us each week as we talk with interesting people we've met to share their stories, ideas, and insights about the innovation, entrepreneurship that they have uncovered along their paths to find success and happiness in work and in life.
So Bela, tell us a little bit about this week's episode.
Hey, Mike, before I do that, I just wanted to remind our listeners that one of the key elements of this podcast is to interview business founders that we can all identify with. We've had coffee roasters on the podcast, software developers, business consultants, cafe and restaurant owners. So we're not trying to discuss how to start the next Facebook or Google. What we want to do is bring you stories that you can identify with, and hopefully that will inspire you to realize, hey, I can do that, and then take the first step to start your business journey. With that in mind, this week's guest is Ian Measeck. He and his father run a house painting business.
This is a really interesting interview, Bela. But before we begin, let's take a second to remind our listeners that this podcast is brought to you in part by the law firm of Phillips Lytle, LLP. And this is a sponsorship that makes a lot of sense to us, right, Bela? You know this firm well, don't you?
I sure do. I have worked with the key entrepreneurship practice partners of Phillips Lytle for over 20 years. Their attorneys are nationally recognized, and they take an entrepreneurial approach to legal matters, and they have a long history of success with assisting startup businesses. The attorneys at Phillips Lytle are my go-to team for guiding startup businesses down the path to success.
Yeah, Bela, you and I are really excited to have Phillips Lytle as our show sponsor, and we both know that they think like entrepreneurs, taking a pragmatic approach to getting things done and spotting issues before they become problems. So we're happy to recommend that if you need good, solid advice starting, funding, or selling a business, whether you're a single-person startup or working on a 9-figure exit, we can confidently recommend the attorneys at Phillips Lytle. Bela, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with them?
So for more information, contact Rich Honan, who is a Phillips Lytle partner. If you're old school, like Mike and I, you can give Rich a call at 518-618-1225. Or if you're of the generation that prefers online communication, you can reach Rich directly from his firm's website at phillipslytle.com. That's PHILLIPSLYTLE.com.
And it'll be great for us if you let Rich know how you heard about Phillips Lytle by listening to the Unconventional Path podcast. All right, with that said, let's jump right into today's interview with Ian Measeck.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to today's podcast. It's Bela here, and today I'm here with Ian Measeck. He runs a painting and wallpapering business, which is a family business. So I think today is going to be a great conversation about family businesses and working with your dad and the fun and the challenges that come with that. So welcome to the show, Ian.
Thanks, Bela.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the business.
Well, the business name is Adirondack Paint and Paper. My father started it back in 1986, and it was out of necessity. He had a teaching degree in phys ed, and at the time they were cutting budgets at schools, and he had a hard time finding work, so he had painted through college to get his way through college, and it was a natural, like, I need to do something to make some money to feed my family, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
And now here we are, 2019.
So he was a school teacher and
he
got
never
laid off, or he never got employed?
Right. He was never employed.
Got it.
Right. He had a degree. He actually worked in the bar business for a while, and then that partnership dissolved. And trying to find a job in '86, because I was born in '79, so he graduated before I did. So there was a lag time there before he started looking for a job.
Yes. Okay. And so do you know why he picked the paint and wallpaper business?
Well,
other than he had the skill and he did it in college?
That's pretty much it. And I mean, if you think about the cost of entry for it doesn't require a lot of overhead to get going.
Right.
You get a couple customers, you get a little word of mouth, and before you know it, you've worked for the whole summer. And for a couple $1,000s, you buy some brushes and some ladders, and off you go.
Yeah. So I think this notion of startup cost is an important one to our listeners, because there are some businesses that intrinsically have a very high capital cost to get going.
Right.
You got to build a manufacturing plant.
Sure.
And other businesses, and we've had several guests like this on the podcast in the past, the startup cost is very low. And that makes it very attractive to get going. The challenge with that, of course, is it also makes it easier for competitors to get into the business.
Right.
So that means a lot of your ability to keep in business and stay in business has to do with your brand recognition in the community and sort of the customer service and the word of mouth. So how do you guys think about that?
Quality. Honestly, and you're right when you say it's easy, the cost of entry is low, and it's easy for someone to go buy a couple paintbrushes and call themselves a painter.
Yes.
I mean, how many times have you run into someone, I can paint.
Yes.
Right? And so what sets us apart, what I strive to accomplish, is a high level of quality in my product and a high level of professionalism in dealing with customers. Right? So just give people respect, right? And what they pay for, and high quality end product. And it seems it's worked for us.
Yeah.
We haven't done a whole lot of official branding up until recently. And that's honestly because last winter we slowed down a lot, and I started looking back as to why, because up until now it's been a lot of all word of mouth. Like, I haven't really had to do any advertising, and it just works. Nobody has any phone books anymore. Right?
To look you up.
To look us up. And so I started looking, and I said, well, nobody can find us. So now I've tried to increase my online presence and increase my branding, and that's certainly gotten me more phone calls. I don't know if it's translated to more work. I'm busy as I want to be, for sure. But yeah, quality. It's all about quality. I mean, anybody can show up to your house and paint your room, but to show up to your house and be on time, show up when you say you're going to show up, be presentable, and treat people with respect, and produce a good quality product. That's pretty much it right there, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I used to have a neighbor that was in the home renovation business. And he said those exact same things. He said, show up when you first of all, return phone calls.
Oh, that's huge. You
Right?
know how many times people, thank you for calling me back. And I said, well, this is how, if I don't call you back, I don't get work. Why would I not call you back?
Right. Call people back. Show up when you tell them you're going to show up. Be clean and presentable, and show them respect, and deliver a reasonable product. And he goes, you're ahead of 90% of other people in this business.
At least 90%.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's good. So let's go back a little bit. How did you get into the business? What was sort of your thinking of? So let's first even go back further than that. High school in Warrensburg?
I went to school. I graduated from Warrensburg in '97.
So that's Warrensburg, New York, for
Warrensburg,
you
New
listeners.
York, right? And I went to college. Well, so I did 2 years at Adirondack. It was Adirondack Community College at the time.
Okay.
Because I hadn't decided what I wanted to do yet. And then I actually took a year off between my sophomore and junior year and traveled the country and played vagabond for a while, which was a perfect experience. I recommend that highly to anyone that can. I went back to school at Plattsburgh State in upstate New York and got my degree in environmental science.
Okay.
2.5 years later. So I graduated December of 2002. I got out, applied to a whole bunch of jobs, and I don't know if it was timing. My interview skills at the time were less than stellar, I think. So I was having a difficult time finding a job, similar to my father in 1986, right? So April rolls around, and I'd had a good time skiing, but I needed some money, and I needed to not be a drain on the system. And that's about when we started to get busy in the painting business. So
Yes.
I started working, because I had done some work for my father in the summers through college and whatever. So I wasn't completely clueless. And to be honest, 1 year, 2 years, 3, now it's 2019, and here I am. So I can't say that it was ever a very defined, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to pursue.
Yes.
It worked. My girlfriend, who became my fiance, who is now my wife at the time, had a job in Lake George, so we were kind of locked into the area.
Yes.
And it worked.
Excellent.
It provided flexibility and the money that I needed to live.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And so, how big is the business now?
right now we have 4 employees and me and my father.
Okay.
Right. And it fluctuates. I mean, at one time we had 11 employees. You know, in the summertime I try and ramp up to 6. 6 seems to work pretty well for us.
Okay.
I've had a hard time finding employees the last couple of years, but that's common, I think, in the construction trade.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. You know, oftentimes when we've had people on from high-tech businesses, they always say the same thing. It's a real challenge to find talented people that are skilled. Mm-hmm. And in certain businesses, like you're a computer programmer, you can get a degree in computer programming,
Right?
and you can put it on your resume, and then you sort of have a credential to get hired. So how does that work in your industry, right?
Yeah, you know, it's funny you bring up the credentials. So we'll start with how the hiring, how I find people, and then we'll move on to the credentials.
That'd be perfect.
There is no. I put out an ad, and every phone call I get, I ask for a resume. Half the time I get one, maybe. I've gotten resumes that are like somebody hand wrote a couple things on a piece of loose leaf paper and, you know, giving it to me that way. I like to meet face to face, because that first impression, the way they look, the way they carry themselves, you know, you can kind of tell how they might work with the crew. And because we have such a small crew, the 2 of the guys I have with me now have been working for 10 plus years.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we're kind of a little family. So the work you do is maybe not even as important as how you'll fit in with the crew. If we all work together well, because I can teach anyone how to do this. Mm-hmm. It's not rocket science. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, it's prep work. I can teach you in a month. And if your personality can fit in and you're willing to come to work consistently,
yes,
then I can make that work. And I've had a hard time. I just think that it's hard work. People don't want to come to work. It's not glorious. There's nothing. It's not like, oh, well, what do you do? I'm a painter. Like,
yes.
You know, you don't get the, oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yes.
You don't get that reaction. And some older guys I can hire, but, you know, like I have a guy that just kind of retired this year. He was semi-retired for a couple years, and this year at the end of the season, he just decided that he physically can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so it's easier for me to find workers from that generation because, you know, they were more apt to think highly of a labor-oriented trade,
yeah.
right? And with younger kids, younger people, just people don't want to work. I've had a running ad for 4 months, and I have had 2 responses.
Wow.
You know, so I can get all the work I want. I just can't find people to do it.
Yes.
Right. And so, okay, that leads me into the whole credential thing. There is really I don't get a resume that says I have this 2-year degree from such and such a place for professional painting. There are unions, so I can get a union painter. I'm not a union shop, so that, union painters are going to work because they get higher wages,
yes.
right? My most recent idea is to approach the local high school and the guidance counselor or the vice principal or whoever and ask for a list of students that might be suitable for trades, right? Or people who've done some BOCES work and
yes.
right? And because that's when I need my most help is right in the summer. So I get a kid who wants to learn something because honestly, you can make a living doing this, right? You just need to have some basic knowledge. And, I'm going to try that. I don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah.
Ideally, I get a couple kids that want to learn some things and it'll serve them well through the rest of it. Even if they don't go on, they graduate high school and they don't go on to be a painter, at least they'll have that knowledge. That if they get laid off from whatever job they're doing, they can turn around and get a job in the summer for a while to carry on.
Right. And my father always used to say, he used to say, son, I know you're going to college, you're getting an engineering degree, but it's always good to keep a trade.
I know a lot of people have said that.
Right. It's always good to keep a trade.
Right.
And mine was during the summers, I was a mason's helper.
There you go.
So, I know how to mix mud, as we called it, and lay block and brick and pour concrete foundations and stuff. So
and work hard.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right?
It taught me a good lesson, right? So
Sure.
It was like, I can do this, and I looked around. And being a mason is really tough work.
Yes, it is.
And I looked around and I said, I don't see anybody that's like much older than 45 doing this.
No. And if they are older than that, they're not moving very fast.
Right. Right. So, so it was a good lesson. So in hiring people, one of the things I think I heard you say was that attitude is really important.
It is.
And that reminded me of the founder of Southwest Airlines. Who I heard an interview with a number of years ago, Herb Kelleher, and someone asked him, like, what's the number one thing you look for? And he goes, look, he said it's basically the same thing you said. I can teach anyone how to be a ticket agent. I can teach someone how to be a pilot. I hire for attitude, and I can then train them, or they can be trained into the particular job. If they have the right attitude, they're willing. So it's interesting that you and your business here in Warrensburg, New York, said exactly the same thing, how important attitude is.
I would be shocked if it wasn't universal.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, there's some technical trades, technical skills that people need to have across various careers, right? But attitude, I mean, if you're willing to learn and you're willing to, honestly, life is about attitude. If you're willing to have a good attitude, how much better is your just day-to-day life if you treat people with respect? That's...
Yeah. Well, you heard it here, folks. If you have a good attitude and you're looking for a job, you can check the show notes out and I have Ian's contact information. He's looking for people.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Great. So you and your father are in this business. So I think you're the first guest we've had that's a family business of multi-generational,
a second generation,
generation family business. Right. So how does that work? What's the share what you feel comfortable sharing with us on how that works?
My dad and I have an awesome relationship. I've talked to other people that have the family, or I could never work for my dad.
Yes.
Right. I've never really had that issue. I mean, I'm not going to say that we haven't had. There's one thing for me personally that is a struggle is that I don't really enjoy the blurring between, especially in the beginning, the way he was. I wanted, I had my dad and then I had my boss, and then there was this blurring where it was, was he my dad? Was he my boss? Like which?
Yes. What hat are you wearing today?
Exactly, right? Or, my mom and dad would come over for dinner and we would chat about work. And my mom hated that, But that's life. I mean, it's just it blurred together.
Yes.
And I kind of sided with my mom. Like, I really enjoy keeping it separate, but increasingly it's just life, right? I mean, you talk about work when you need to talk about work, you do other things when you want to do other things. And, but overall, I think we've had just open communication, make sure that, we both kind of have clear boundaries.
Yes. How do you divide up those boundaries? How do you divide up the responsibilities?
So in the beginning, I was basically just labor in the field, right? Because I didn't know much as far as skills go. I didn't know much about employee management.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure I know much about employee management now, but I'm doing my best.
So how did that work in the field in the beginning, right? Because you're the boss's son. How does that?
Yeah, but the trades are funny because if you don't have experience, if you're there's this hierarchy of authority.
Yes.
Right. So you have the older guy who's been doing it for 30 years, and he could not care less if you're the boss's son or if you have 4 college degrees or whatever. It doesn't matter, because if you can't pull your own weight or you can't hold your own in whatever tasks you're doing, it doesn't matter.
And when you have a small crew of 3 or 4 or 5 people,
right,
if one person is not pulling their weight, it really shows.
It shows.
Right.
Yep.
It's drastic.
It is. So, so early, it didn't matter if I was the boss's son or not. Right. And I tried to make it, I was never that person where I was like, well, that's, I can sit here and take an extra 45 minutes for my lunch because I'm the boss's son.
You didn't play that card.
I did not play that card because I understood that to get respect, you had to work hard just like everybody else works hard. And I still do. I mean, I don't necessarily spend all day, every day on the job anymore, right? So I go do this and I go do that and I go, get work and I do whatever, office work.
Yes.
So sometimes I wonder if the fact that I'm not on the job, and because it's the trades, if you're not on the job, not doing work, sometimes I get this impression that people think that I'm actually not working, which, isn't true. But unless you've been in that role, you don't necessarily understand exactly what's going on. So, but yeah, to go back to the dynamics, we've never really defined specifically the roles. As I got older, I guess there was a time that my dad wanted to step back from the day-to-day job site management. So I started taking over that role. So I would, I would manage the job site. So you could kind of say I was like the job site foreman.
Okay.
Which really only meant that I had to keep track of how much product we needed for the day, make sure we had what we needed to get through the day, keep track of what everybody did. So at the end of the day, we could record that, make sure people showed up. I didn't necessarily march around and tell people what to do,
yes,
which is kind of... and then as it got on, he got a little older and, now he spends most of his time at the shop, or not even then. He spends a couple hours at the shop or does what he needs to do, and then he does what he wants to do. And I have taken over more and more his role.
Yes.
Right. So it was nothing ever decided, nothing ever definite. It just kind of started at me being laborer, flowing into me being management.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So when there's something needs to be done, you do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the business itself. The name of the business is Adirondack Paint and Paper. Mm-hmm. So I assume that means you do some painting, interior, exterior, or both?
Interior and exterior.
Okay.
Yeah, both for sure. Summertime, we try to, stay outside, obviously, because that's the only time you can. And this time of year, we transition inside. Obviously, people want inside work done in the summer. And if I could carry a big enough crew, I could definitely accommodate that all summer. This year, particularly, I've struggled with trying to stay outside because I only have so much personnel. And as much as customers would allow me, I would push them off to do inside work this time of year.
Yes.
And through the winter.
Yeah, yeah. And do you do private residence, commercial work?
Yep. All our work is, I'd say 99% of our work is private residence. No commercial. I mean, a very small bit of commercial. And new construction, I would have to look to see what percentage is new construction as opposed to just residential repaints.
Yes.
And that kind of ebbs and flows with the economy. Right now, there's a lot of building going on, so we have a lot more new construction. And then there's some years that I think, it's 85% residential repaints.
Okay.
Yep.
And typically you have one crew out, two crews. How do you sort of do that?
I like to have two, split between two job sites. And I keep going back to this year because it's kind of an anomaly. This year, I think it started last year, but I started transitioning to having just one crew. And that way I could kind of focus all of my resources, all of my equipment on one place, and we could move around from job site to job site. That's a little harder to manage with customers because sometimes I feel like it's easier for me to have a couple different jobs going because then I'm kind of keeping more people happy at once. Mm-hmm. But that's my problem. That's me just being able to manage communication with customers. So
Right. And that brings a good point. How do you manage that, right? If you're painting outside and, you tell me you'll start painting my house in 3 weeks, and then in the ensuing 3 weeks between now and the 3 weeks now, we have 7 days of rain.
Right.
All of a sudden, I'm a week late, at least, if not more, right? So how do you sort of deal with that? How do you manage that? Because that seems to be setting customer expectations seems to be a big element of professions like this.
Right. And it's gotten, people expect more sooner now than they used to. And so
more communication?
No, just more of everything. No, that's not true. Quicker. Things to happen quicker.
Oh, okay.
They want things to happen fast. Like, I called you and you're going to come, next week, right? Right. Honestly, I'm to the point now, if you call me for exterior work, say you called me in September because you thought, oh, shoot, I need to get my house painted this fall.
Yes.
I'm booking into next year and probably into the middle of next summer. Okay, back up. So I very rarely will tell you that I'm going to be there in 3 weeks. I have a running list and I'll say that, all right, well, you're 4 or 5 jobs down on the list, or I'll give you an approximate time frame, sometime in August.
Yes.
And now, listen, I've been doing this long enough where for the most part, May's rainy, right? So I'm going to lose some time in May. So I don't really try to schedule as much into May. But then June, July, usually August, we get drier, right? And then after that, it's just communication. If I told you that I'm going to come in, if I'm going to have your work done before July 4th, and it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, and I can't, then it's just, I call you up and you can look out the window and see that it's raining. Right. Unless you're completely unreasonable, everybody's, fine with that. It's really just about communicating. That's where the calling people back comes from that we talked about earlier.
Yes.
There's lots of ways to communicate right now in this society. Just communicate. And more often than not, people are more than fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah, because, it's interesting in this business, to be successful, you have to have a pretty good skill set because you're not only managing employees and their schedules, right? And if you have a crew of 4 or 5 people and one person's out sick for a week, I mean, that's a 20% hit on your capacity.
It is.
And so not only are you managing that, you're managing your customers as well. And they're all anxious. They want, as you said, to get their house painted today.
Right.
And so that takes, you're juggling a lot of balls there. And it sounds like that's a really important skill to have in this type of a business when you're providing a service to customers.
I agree. And that's one of my biggest frustrations, actually. Because ideally, my employees are I shouldn't say this out loud, but little clones of me, right? Uh-huh. They're going to wake up early in the morning and they're going to be gung-ho to get after it every day. And they're going to come in, they're going to work until the job is done, not just until 4:30 when we end our day.
Yes.
And my crew right now, for the most part, is awesome, right? I mean, we all have sick days. We all have things that we need to deal with.
Sure.
I'm not completely unreasonable. And it's Bela, it's just about, it's communication. And sometimes customers, well, will you just hire some more guys? It's like, yeah, if you know someone, send them my way.
Yeah.
But it's, and I try to remember that my employees are my most valuable resource. Because without them, I'm not getting anything done. I mean, I can get some things done, sure.
Right.
But
The employees are your manufacturing plant, so to speak, right? They're the factory.
Yeah, they're the factory. They're the employees in the factory. They're the machines. They're everything.
They're everything,
right? So they need time off. You give them time off, and then you just deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Is there a particular sort of market segment you go after? I mean, we talked about residential, but there's a broad spectrum of residential, right? There's $60,000 houses, and customers have certain level expectations. And in this region where we are, there's $3 million houses,
right,
where customers have certain expectations. Have you targeted a specific segment of that market?
I have. Honestly, we target the high end, the $500,000, $1 million. We do a lot of second homes around Lake George, or primary home residences for that matter. And I think that has just been a direct result of quality. And because of the quality that I shoot for, I think sometimes my prices are a little higher than others. So it's just kind of naturally I fall into that market category because they don't usually.
They're not as price sensitive.
Exactly, they're not as price sensitive, right? But that said, I'm not just because if you have a $60,000 house and you call me up and you need some painting done, I'll come to your painting if we can make it work, cost wise and schedule wise. And I'm not going to say no just because you live in a $60,000 house.
Sure.
But that said, the $2 million houses, $3 million houses are way more fun to work on.
Mm-hmm. And how long does a typical painting job last? Is it 3-4 days? Is it a week? Is it a month? Or is there no such thing as typical?
It's not really typical. Yeah, I don't think there's such thing as typical. But if you take for this area, like if you look around at the houses that we're looking at outside the window, a week for a typical exterior paint job.
Okay.
Right. But yeah, there's not really a typical length of time. That would be awesome though, because then it would be really easy to bid things.
To schedule.
Yeah, and schedule.
So are you the primary person who does the estimating and the bidding and stuff?
I am. Yep.
How much of time does that take up of yours?
It comes in, it's strange. It comes in waves. So I'll have a week where it feels like 50% of my time is taken up visiting and writing up bids. And then I'll have other weeks where I have 0, right? And that's seasonal. So it seems like in late August, we're starting to get into fall, people are sensing a change in the seasons. They're like, oh, I had all this outside stuff I needed to do, and I just to get this influx of phone calls.
Yes.
And then again, it'll happen in the spring. It'll happen again after Christmas, probably around late January. But yeah, it's...
And where did you learn that skill?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever really learned it. No, my father, I followed him around and learned through him. Basically, he taught me how to do it. Some of it's been trial and error. I've tried to streamline a little bit of it because he did a lot of, you kind of stand in a room and you look around, you think, well, it's going to take 3 days.
Okay.
Right? And as unscientific as that sounds, after you do it for a while, that actually works.
Okay.
I can kind of stand in a room and tell you about how long it's going to take and how many gallons of paint it's going to take and get pretty close to the price.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Experience was the best teacher for that one.
Yeah, because if you misestimate,
right,
right, if you estimate high, you may not get the job.
Right.
And if you estimate low, you're going to lose money on it.
Right.
And neither one of those situations is good.
Neither one of them. Yep. So I've solved that problem a little bit by working time and material and giving kind of upper end
limits,
quote unquote budget numbers. So
okay.
I would come to your house and I'd say, well, listen, I think it's going to take around, just throwing out a number, $12,000 to do this. I'm going to work for this much per hour per guy plus material up until that $12,000. And if we go over $12,000, that means I messed up. I'm not going to charge you more than that, right? And if I come under that, then I've made what I need to make, and you make out well because it cost $9,500, right, or whatever.
So it's time and material with a cap.
With a cap, exactly.
Oh, that's nice. So that works out for everyone.
Yeah, and so sometimes that's a tough sell because some people like this is how much it's going to cost, exactly. Because for me to come into your house, especially if it starts to get to be a bigger number, or maybe your budget, you have this much money to do the job, and I come in and tell you that it's going to be $5,000, and you maybe budgeted $4,000, and I tell you that we're going to work with time and material, and we might not get to $5,000. Well, you're going to call somebody else that says, yeah, I can do it for $3,500 for sure.
Right.
Right. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And what role do former customers play in your business?
Oh, former customers are a huge role, especially because most of I'd say 95% of our business is repeat customers and word of mouth. So a friend of a friend said you did some work for them and you were great. I'd like you to come and do some work for me. And those are the ones that I have the highest percentage at, to actually get that job. Cold calls, it's 50-50 sometimes if I'm going to get that one or not. But if you have a specific reference, you're much more likely to get that job.
And do you use? Let's say you came to bid on putting wallpaper in our house, and I asked you for some references. Do you have sort of like 3 or 4 former customers that bingo you give me?
Yep, definitely.
So that's part of the game as well.
It is. I don't. It's funny. You would think I would get that question more, and I don't. I don't really get it hardly at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I have people that I can give you a number to, and you can call them up.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think about the number of times we've painted our various homes or had our various homes painted. And they've always been, you ask a neighbor, you ask a friend.
Who do you use?
It's a very personal reference oriented type of business.
Right.
It's like finding a dentist when you move into a new area. Yeah.
Right.
What dentist do you go to? Do you like them? Right.
Yeah, definitely. Within the past year or so, I've increased my online presence. So I've been exploring more with Yelp.
Yes.
Right. And Home Advisor is another one. But even still, the personal references, like you said, you ask your neighbor who they use, where they go, whatever. That's bread and butter. That's what gets me most of my work.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you brought this up. So like Home Advisors, Angie's List, et cetera. What impact have they had on sort of the way you do business?
Almost zero. Because I can't say that I've gotten a lot of work through them. I get more phone calls to do more bidding. Insofar that I haven't quite been able to bring myself to do this, but I've almost started charging for estimates. Because everybody offers free estimates.
Yes.
Right? And that's fine. But then we go to, so let's talk about May, June, where, it's great that I'm driving around giving all these numbers, but that's not billable hours.
Right.
Right? So maybe my time would be better spent on site doing some actual work. Now that's a balance, right? So I still need to maintain more work so we can keep growing and keep working. But if 75% of those phone calls don't turn around to actual work, then I'm really just burning gas.
Yeah. It's like in any sales function, qualifying customers to make sure that they're not just kicking the tires, but they're actually serious about it and that you can have a reasonable chance of closing this transaction with them.
Yeah, sure.
Is really important.
Right. And so some of that, I'm not going to say that that's all. That's probably some of my salesmanship or technique. I probably need to revise or refine the way I sell my work, and maybe I could close some more of those deals.
Yeah.
Right. And I understand that. I understand that I just need to get a little better at what I do. So,
But the high percentage of closure is when I tell my neighbor that I used you,
Right.
and then that's better than anything else.
Oh,
As long
sure.
as you show up and you're reasonable, you answer the
that's
phone,
it.
etc.
I answer the phone. I show up.
As long as you don't screw it up, you're going to get that job.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you kind of have to. I kind of would have to try kind of hard to screw it up, right? Because you can go to your neighbor's house and you can look. I mean, painting is you can see everything. It's not, it's even different than a little bit. It's different than carpentry a little, right? Because you could walk in and the house could look good, but maybe structurally some things are
Sketchy.
not quite as they should be.
Yeah.
Right, but the painter, maybe
Paint's
his
on the
painter was
surface.
awesome, and
Right.
it looks awesome in there, right? Well, you walk into somebody's house, and if it looks great, then it's plain as day what you're going to get, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what are sort of the biggest challenges that you see in the business? Let's say the challenges up to this point, and you sort of getting into the business, working with your dad. I know we talked about a couple of these, but what's like the big challenges up to this point, and then what do you see as the challenges going forward for the next 10, 15 years?
Right, yeah. Challenges up until now. For the business, I think I've seen challenges as far as the ebbs and flows of the economy, right? So now the economy is really good. And this is in the past, right? So when the economy is really good, you can find there are painters everywhere. You go into the paint store and you look at their little cork board where all the business cards are, and it's, they're all overlapped. They're everywhere.
Again, easy business to get into.
Easy business to get into. The economy takes a dive. Those guys are all gone, right? So that's a challenge, right? To maintain a loyal customer base to get you through those slow times, okay? And within the last 10 years-ish, New York State has changed some VOC regulations. So there's been a transition as far as the product we use. And that's been a little bit of a struggle because now paint companies are formulating new paints, new stains, new varnishes, right? New products that we've had to learn how to use because, lead-based paint's gone. And it's been gone for a long time. After that, there was oil-based paints, and oil-based everything is the best, right? Well, it's not anymore. But there was definitely a growing state, a growing pains to learn that. The products maybe weren't that good, so we had some product failures, and then we've had to deal with that, customer satisfaction issues.
Yes.
So that's been a struggle. I think employee retention is a struggle. And to be honest, that transitions into current hardships and current challenges in getting employees, retaining employees. I think now and in the future is going to be number one challenge.
Yeah. Do you, you brought up employees, do you do any sort of profit sharing, or what are your thoughts on that, or, any type of incentives for your employees?
Yeah, that's a good question. Currently I do not, but it has been so now that it's funny, I've never been the biggest long-term thinker. So now I have a problem right in front of my face. I'm like, well, shoot, now I need to do something about it to solve the problem. And profit sharing is definitely something that I've been thinking about. Incentives, maybe even so far as to different pay structure. So instead of paying hourly, maybe I pay production, right? So if you get, we'll throw something out there. If you paint 25, we paint 25 windows in a day, you get whatever, $25 a window, or however I would structure that, right? I'm on the fence about that one because then you're going to have people just racing through things so they can get more money. Because I still have to maintain a quality, a standard, right? So yeah, that's definitely an idea. I haven't come to a solution or how to implement that with my business.
Yeah. I ran a manufacturing business for a number of years where we did a lot of welding and cutting and painting of metal.
Right.
And the product we sold was very, very expensive. And we had about 40, 45 employees. And, folks were seeing this product go by them and they were working on, and they were thinking, gosh, the company must be making tons of money. And I'm not.
Right.
And so one of the things I started to do was once a month, I got everybody together, and we had a factory, so everybody was in the same place. And I basically went through the finances for that month very easily. I said, here's the checks we wrote. Here's the checks we cashed.
Right.
So it was very simple, right? It wasn't
transparent.
And transparent. It wasn't, some accountant's P&L statement. It was a very simple, here's the checks we wrote, here's the checks we cashed. And I've kind of broken it into different categories. Here's welding rod, here's paint, here's accessories, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it was eye-opening to people. And here's payroll.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Payroll's checks you right. I mean, I didn't have each individual, so I just had a lump of payroll. And here's taxes, payroll taxes. And here's health insurance and, these other things. And it was eye-opening to people. And so I did that. And in addition to that, I set up a profit-sharing program and it was quarterly. So it wasn't once a year, but it was quarterly. And you had to work at the company for 6 months before you participated in it. And I basically took I said the first $50,000 we make in the business goes into the bank for the company. Then everything thereafter, we split 50-50. So 50% of it goes to profit sharing, 50% of it goes into the bank. Now I knew about how much money the company was going to make, per quarter, right? So yep. I mean, we weren't a huge business. And what we did was, if in a quarter we made $30,000, or 60, and then 30 went to the bank, 60 went to the profit sharing plan, I basically divided by the number of employees we had, and everybody got the same size profit sharing check. And my philosophy there was, the welders got paid a different salary than the guys who cut the metal, and they got paid a different salary than the guys who did the painting. So they got compensated for their skill in their salary.
Right.
But I wanted everybody to work together for the profit sharing. So everybody got the same size check, right?
Okay,
I divided.
Right.
I divided by the number of employees. And it was interesting how it changed behavior. Prior to that, instituting that, people were always, we need more help. We need more help. And then after that, you could kind of see people making the calculation in their head. Oh, that means if we hire another person, we're going to divide by 31 instead of 30.
Right. My profit share goes down.
And then all of a sudden, people would say, hey, Joe, I got an extra hour a day. I can come help you do your thing.
Oh, right.
Right? And they started work. So the ability to work together, it really changed the working together dynamic. And it also reduced our expensible items, welding rod, paint, consumable stuff. That went down by like 30%, because all of a sudden, instead of the guy throwing out this pint of paint, which for us, a gallon of paint was like $500. I mean, it was really expensive paint, right? Yep. And sometimes it was custom colors. They'd save it because they knew at some point in time we'd have a job that can use that paint, right? And all of a sudden, the welding rod, they used it all up. They didn't throw half a welding rod away, and it really worked well for that business, right? This concept of sharing, being transparent. Here's where the money's going. I'm not putting it in my pocket. And number two, let's set up this profit sharing program where we all get the same size check, whether you're the person who answers the phone or whether you're the most highly skilled person in the plant. And we do it on a quarterly basis, so people could see that their actions were going to impact them on the near horizon.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it worked well.
Well, I'm going to have a little homework. Then I like the way that sounds, because that's all the kind of things that I'm trying to, implement in the business. And my business is much smaller, even still, right? I would like to grow and have some more employees. Like if I could I would like to be able to carry 8 to 10 through
12 months a
year.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a little seasonal. It's just the way it is where we live.
Yeah.
But eventually I would like to be able to carry 8 to 10. That would be ideal.
Yeah.
But that's a great idea. I'm going to look into it.
Yeah. Well, we can chat about it more
Yeah.
offline. I went on a little longer than I wanted to.
No, it's awesome.
So we've been going at it 45 minutes already, Ian. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, I've enjoyed this conversation. I didn't really know what to expect, and I think that's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for being on the show. And Adirondack Paint and Paper, Warrensburg, New York. I will make sure to put the contact information in the show notes. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Bela, that was really a great interview, and it was a cool snapshot of both the joys and the challenges of family-owned businesses. What were your takeaways?
So I think the one thing that really stood out to me in my conversation with Ian was his notion that in many ways, painting houses, whether you're painting them outside or inside, is sort of a commodity. And he has to figure out a way of differentiating his product. And, he thought long and hard about, okay, am I going to be the low-priced guy? Am I going to differentiate on price? I mean, that's sort of Walmart strategy. That's, if you go to Walmart, they're competing on price. And I think Ian decided, nope, what we want to do, and probably a lot of credit goes to his father, since it is his father started the business, is that we're going to differentiate on quality. We want to leave our customers really, really happy, and we want to leave them with a beautiful product that they're proud of and that we're proud of. And that he also understood that if he does that, that there's a real good chance that he's going to get recommended. Because I know a couple times we've painted our house, we ask the neighbors or we ask our friends, hey, who painted your house? And so it's a referral type business. It's not an advertising business for the most part. So he decided to differentiate on quality. And I think that's a really good lesson there for entrepreneurs. Oftentimes, we always keep thinking about price. But I think you want to, if you can, take price out of the equation. It's not about price. It's about having something that you do better than anyone else.
Especially in this type of business, Bela, where there's two factors of this business I think that were interesting to me. One is that it's not like you're going to the grocery store and seeing the price of Heinz ketchup versus Hunt's ketchup versus store brand ketchup, right? Each time you want to get a price, you have to get a hold of the person. And as we said, sometimes they don't call you back. You have to schedule a quote. The estimator has to come out. There's still some uncertainty. So it's not a fixed price, easy to compare model. And then the second component of this was interesting, that unlike some businesses, the quality is very evident in the job that you're looking at. Even if you don't know what a good paint job is, you can tell, the lines are cut in evenly, and look at the finish on the paint, really looks nice. The choice of color was great. Maybe the person will tell you, they cleaned up really well afterwards and they were on time. So the elements of quality in this business are very, very clear to any person who's looking at it, unlike the example he used was carpentry or plumbing or something like that, where when it's under the surface, right, you can't always see what's there. So I thought those two factors made this a very interesting choice that his father and then passed on to Ian made to really focus on the quality side of the business.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. Those were good observations. I think the other challenge when you talk about these small businesses, whether it be a restaurant or a cafe or painting business or coffee roasting business, is finding folks to work in your business, finding employees. And, in the paint business or in the restaurant business, you got to have some level of skills. And this notion of trade skills, carpenters, plumbers, and we hear a lot about this in the press, that there's a real shortage of trades folks. And Ian emphasized this. He has a really hard time finding people. And if he could find more people, he could get more business. So he's not limited by potential customers, or he's not limited by people calling him. He's limited by the amount of staff that he can have and the amount of crews that he can have painting.
Yeah, it's not a demand-driven business. It's a resource constraint-driven business. And look at the time frame he was talking about to quote a deal. Could you imagine if you needed to get your car fixed and the repair shop said, "Oh yeah, we can fix your car in 4 months," right? Right? It wouldn't work, right? But this is a business where that he can get away with that, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but just people are willing to wait to get their house painted. It's not something that generally they need right now. But to me, that's a sign that with a better staffing model, he could meet demand more quickly, have shorter delays, and keep his crews busy. But he doesn't have the human capital. It points out a really interesting difference between the German model and the U.S. model. And here in Germany, there's an apprentice system, and you become a master painter, and you get a certificate. And I mean, there's still the same issues with supply. But there's a educational track that leads to at least some supply of painters. And Ian talked about that, about trying to work with kind of the local educational institutions in terms of trying to establish a pipeline of talent. And also, this is subjective, and it's through a weird cultural lens that I have. But I think people who work in the trades get more respect from society here. At least in the city that I live in, if you go and say you're a painter, remember he said that if I'm a painter, I'm a master painter. This is respected here more than I think in the U.S., where people kind of look at you sideways. So that's just a cultural thing. But yeah, the human capital issue was amazing. And right, how he's had an ad for how long running continuously, right? Amazing.
Right. Yeah, he could double the size of his crew, and he'd still have plenty of work.
Yeah.
So that's interesting from a business perspective, right? Here you have a business, you can sell more product than you can produce.
Yep.
And getting the talent to help you produce the product is your limiting factor.
So sorry.
No, go.
I wonder how much technology will transform this business. So I wonder if at some point you'll have a robotic device that can lay on paint. You'll have a drone that will fly up and spray the exact right layer of paint. I mean, I wonder how far off we are from having some machines. We talk about replacing, jobs replacing people as a bad thing. But in this case, these are jobs that are going unfilled, right? So this is a case where labor makes it better, and then you can train people in, okay, the detail work maybe that the robot can't do, or the estimating part, and you're still hiring people, right? But somebody's got to do this, robots can't do everything, right? And somebody's got to clean up, and somebody's got to prep. And so this is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how digitalization impacts the house painting business.
Right. Or, are we going to have paint at all in the future? Maybe all of our walls are big LED screens.
Yeah, coated with something you can change the colors on your smartphone. You can do it with your lights.
Right, exactly.
Bela, maybe we should get out of the podcasting business and get into the electronic wall covering business. And unfortunately, we disrupt the painters right out of business.
Yeah. Well,
that'd be
don't
cool.
hold your breath on that one.
I don't know. I mean, if it was a film... Right? Think about, we had a guest who did the write-on whiteboard film, right? Could you do a film and it plugged into a wall outlet and you're done?
Right. You can have any color you want, right?
Any color you want.
And seasonally, you can change it.
Absolutely.
Because right now,
when you're,
painting a room is a big deal, right? You got to empty it. There's a lot of stuff that happens in order to paint a room.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just 2-3 hours and you're done, right?
No.
It's a week,
and it's messy.
That room is down for a week.
Yeah.
So there you go. You heard it here. Business
it.
Opportunities. Mike and I are just giving them away.
Think about it too, because then your art can go directly on the wall, and we all know people who do this. I know you and I don't do this, but there are people that do this. If your Aunt Rita is coming over or whatever, right? You get that picture of you and Aunt Rita out, right? And you put it on the shelf, right? When she comes over. This could be hooked into your calendar so that when people come over, you've got the framed snapshots right built into the wall of how much you love, Aunt whoever, right? It's brilliant, right? How much embarrassment would it save you,
Right. Exactly.
Bela, you've got every one of the ants up on the wall except for me. What is it with you? Right?
Yeah.
You must not love me.
Where's my picture?
Exactly. So I love this idea. All right.
Yeah.
But the HR challenges were pretty amazing. And I thought that was interesting. Communication changed. I love this. Like, people don't have phone books anymore. I'm like, yeah, people don't really have phone books anymore. And that was
Yeah.
how, when we were younger, you'd find a painter, right?
Absolutely. It's the Yellow Pages.
Right. And now it's all digital.
It's all digital.
And he's had to manage that, right? Which is interesting. Yelp and some of the other tools that you mentioned, the handyman websites, right, that make referrals.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Yelp, I've done 2 other podcasts, which will be coming out shortly, interviewing small business folks. And with one of them, we had this conversation about Yelp, how it's a curse and it's a blessing. And that, you really need to be careful. And they had interesting comments about Yelp in that anybody can post anything to Yelp. Unlike, an Amazon review of a product, you're a sort of a verified user in order to post something.
Unmoderated.
And yeah, it's unmoderated at all. And so there was sort of, one person I was talking to was saying, gee, out of the box we had a total of 10 reviews and one of them was bad. And it was just, whether we screwed up or whether it was just a person who likes to do bad reviews doesn't matter. Or if it was a competitor, right?
Devastating. And
it's devastating.
Right. Huh?
Yeah, it's devastating. So, but you got to manage it. The point is, it's there. You're not getting rid of it. So you have to figure out how to overcome that stuff. And that's a real important aspect these days of business. It's not just sticking an ad in the Yellow Pages or in the newspaper, and that's going to drive business. The first place people go is they go to these various different referral sites to figure out, are you good? And what's better than a referral site is going to my neighbor.
Word of mouth.
My neighbor says, hey, I had Ian in here. He painted my house on the outside, and I can look at it, and I can immediately make a judgment whether that's good or not. And so this is a real referral business.
Right. And he said those people were less price sensitive, right? And they were more willing to commit to a job once he gave them a quote. It's fascinating, right?
That's
Sticky customers,
That's right. That's right. He said they're not price sensitive because they've seen the quality, right? They're not sort of like taking a risk. They have confidence that there's going to be a good job and a good outcome.
Yeah. Do you remember if you look up pest control or driving schools in the phone book, and people used to create their names with letters A in front, right? Like I'll be AAA, so I can be first in the phone book, house painters, right?
Yes.
AAA.
AAA, right?
Yep. And Action with 2 A's, right? Action Pest Control and Aardvark Pest Control. And there were very little pest control companies or driving schools or whatever, their names started with K or L or heaven forbid W, right? Interesting. And then I'll bet you that's gone away now. I'll bet you if we looked at the registered company names that practice has stopped because these are not alphabetical anymore.
It's not a driver.
Yeah.
It's not a driver.
Interesting. That's an aside. I loved your conversation about profit sharing and designing incentives. And he was like, wow, that's a really cool idea. Right? How do you figure these things out if you're a small business person? How do you figure out what the right motivator is and how do you design it?
Yeah, I think, you can look at, there's lots of publications, a lot of articles been written about motivation, profit sharing, different ways of doing it. And, in the example I talked about in the podcast there, even the quarters that basically we wrote $500 checks to everybody, which was a small quarter for us, right, from a profit sharing perspective. For someone who in our shop at that time was making, $9.50 an hour, a $500 check is a lot of money. And so the point being here is that you can use this, however you design it, you want to use it to make sure it motivates the type of behavior that you're trying to achieve. And we were trying to achieve things like cutting our costs and cutting our waste, and it was very successful at that. And people use profit sharing for employee retention, and here that I think would be a big thing. There's a real skills shortage. So I don't want someone leaving. So what can I do to help them stay here? and to motivate them to stay, make them feel like they're part of the organization and they're contributing to the overall success of the organization, right? People hand out shares of stock, but if your company's not going to be sold or your company's not going to go public, my share of stock, is not worth all that much. So I think this is a much more interesting way of sort of motivating folks, but again, you got to design it in such a way that you end up doing the things you want to achieve. And hey, if you end up with some unintended consequences, you can change it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like the 10 Commandments, right? We can change any incentive programs we set up. But I'm a firm believer in incentive programs, and I'm a firm believer in doing them frequently. Once a year is not sufficient. When you have these once a year profit sharing programs, I'm a believer in either monthly or quarterly, but doing them quickly, tie them, link them to what's important in the business.
Yeah, and do some experiments. And you got to measure the outcomes, right? It's no good to set up an incentive program and then not be able to measure how it's impacting the behavior and the attitudes of your employees, right?
And they have to be transparent.
Yep.
People have to
open
believe
and
it.
Honest.
People have to believe it, and they have to be honest about it, because otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, so there's a nice leadership lesson there, right? In terms of being open and honest and transparent with your people, and then figuring out what their needs are and your needs are, and finding a system to match those up, right?
Yep. Hey, and look, I remember that's interesting. You brought, I forgot about this. There was a person at the company there who I remember coming up to me and he said, "Can I trade my profit sharing check-in for more days off?"
Love it. And you, of course, said,
"Well, yeah, we came up with an algorithm, right? So many dollars per day." And for that person, more days off was more important than the cash.
And you just saved yourself losing an employee who would go change the job, not for more money, but for another week or two of vacation. And I have friends that have done the same thing. They're like, no, I like my job, but I only got 2 weeks. And I had friends that are getting 3 and 4, and I switched jobs. I know one person who took a pay cut to get an extra 2 weeks of vacation because that trade-off was worth it for her.
So the point here, and your comment triggered it, is this notion of the same things are not important to everybody. So you have to figure out what they are, and you have to have an environment where people are willing to express that. And then you want to build in the flexibility that gives people that option.
Yeah. As my friend Farzad Mahmoudi tells anybody who will listen all the time when he's talking about supply chains, it fits here with HR systems too. One size does not fit all.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So anything else we want to kick around on this one, Mike?
I think we should wrap it up. I like to be respectful of our listeners' times and not go on too much of a tangent on things, but it was an interesting path today. Great interview, really interesting things to think about, really understanding these small family businesses. They get passed down. Oh, we didn't even mention, right, the conflict, the role conflicts, father versus boss, right? That's just a great illustration of these things that all of these family businesses, I think that I've been around, struggle with this, right?
They sure do.
Are you being dad or are you being my boss? So I wanted to highlight that. That was and I think he told a great story about around the dinner table, right?
Right.
Going to his parents for dinner, or his parents came over, whatever. But yeah, thanks for interviewing Ian. I thought it was great. Listeners, as always, we're really happy that you joined us in our podcasting adventure for this week. We hope that you found the last hour or so interesting and thought-provoking. Hey, if you want, if you can, let us know that you're listening and that you're interested and you have questions and you have suggestions. You can email us at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. We're happy to answer listener questions either on air or off as you wish. And we're certainly open to topics and people that you might think would be interesting for us to interview. And of course, the podcasting thing. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe if you're not, or hit like or whatever on your podcast app that you're using. And, if you can take 3 minutes and write a quick review, that really is helpful for us. And of course, if you want to share us with others that might be interested, that is always appreciated.
Yeah, so that's it for this week. Thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to you joining us for our next episode. Signing off from upstate New York. Hey, Mike, see you next week.
See you next week, Bela. I will enjoy a pretzel and a beer over here in Münster, Germany, and I wish you an excellent week.
This podcast is produced for Mike and I by our friends at Busy Media of Schenectady, New York. They can be found at busymedia.co.